All right, welcome back. It's been a while, but let's get into some trade rumors, free agent rumor. Let's see what's going on. Hockey's a really interesting time right now. First on the docket, and I'm sure most people are well aware of this, JT Miller may be on the block. We don't know if the Canucks are going to trade him or not. We don't really know what the new management has in store in terms of, are they going to keep players? Are they going to sell players? I think they're kind of waiting to see how the rest of their season pans out before the deadline. But I have a feeling at the end of this, by the trade deadline, they're going to have some pieces to sell. So JT Miller being a huge piece. He's really come into his own as a Coyote, I'm wearing the Coyotes, as a Canucks player. I got the C's right and I got the West Coast right. Just didn't get the team right. So at first glance, the Leafs are very interested. Now, this I don't really see happening. JT Miller signed at $5.25 million for this season and next season. 5.25. The Leafs, they got the big four contracts. They're very tight on cap space. They're going to have to re-sign Jack Campbell at the end of this. I believe it's at the end of this year. Trades that would look like from the Leafs would be Kerfoot, and they'd have to do a bunch of dumping of the salary cap to make room for this trade. And it's not like the Canucks have really any room to play with either. I don't really see this being a possibility. Next up, I actually want to talk about the Rangers. Now, the Rangers are interesting. JT Miller, obviously going back to New York to play with the Rangers, would be a nice storyline. A weird storyline. Rubbing off the T on Toffoli's name, but we're not there yet. The Rangers are another team that's really at the cap. They'll be at the cap next season. They get a few million more in relief from like buyouts, penalties, and crap like that. But Fox's contract kicks in next season. Zibanejad got a nice extension, so it's going to be tough for them next season. But it could be doable from New York's standpoint. At the same time, what do you do with JT Miller? Does he play on the wing? You got Zibanejad, top line center. Dude's an animal. Then you got Ryan Strome, who's having an excellent season, who's probably going to get an extension, deservedly so. He's fitting really well with that organization. So what does that leave JT Miller? Almost a point per game player. A third line center? Probably not. So I don't know about the prospects of Miller going back to New York either. I like to root against the Rangers, but I think it would be fun to see, and the Rangers would be a whole lot better if they got JT Miller and didn't have to give up much. Players I think they would give up for JT Miller include Gorgiev. He's a restricted free agent after this year. Canucks really need some direction with goaltending, or at least a backup. Halak's great. I love Halak. His career is winding down. I don't know how long he'll be a Canuck in the NHL. So another interesting piece would be Capo Caco. We don't really know what he brings yet. We see spurts of greatness, and then more games than not, he does nothing and is very ineffective and can be almost a defensive liability. He's young, he's growing, he's developing. Who knows? We've seen flashes of what he could be. We'll see if that translates in the future. But that's an interesting one. The last one is the Minnesota Wild, which I think could be intriguing. I didn't put the Bruins up here too because I honestly don't think the Bruins will make a trade for JT Miller. They probably should because they need a second line center. And Hall has done pretty good. He's like a 3A, 2B center. But JT Miller would be a great fit, but I don't see the Bruins making it work with their cap space necessarily. And I don't know. There's a whole lot of moving pieces or non-moving pieces with Boston that I don't see it happening. Really, any second line center that's on the market, Boston should be looking at. But we know how Don Sweeney goes, and we got Charlie Coyle getting $5 million a year, so no trade clause. So there's that. But the Wild would be really interesting. this is the year for the Wild. This is the year they could make a run. They have pieces. They look great. They have young players that are up and coming. They have a plethora of prospects. But this has to be the year. Next year, the Suter and Parise buyout penalties jump up, almost $8 million. They'll have pieces to get rid of. Rask is making $4 million a year. Victor Rask, his contract's up. Who else? Goligoski is making $5 million a year. His contract's up. I'm sure they'd love to keep Goligoski. He's been fantastic, but we'll see. What their cap space is really going to be constricting next year. But a guy like JT Miller could bring some depth. You have Freddie Gaudreau sometimes playing a second line, and he has wingers that I like Freddie Gaudreau, and he's a solid player, but he shouldn't be playing like the second line center role. You have Joel Eriksson, you have pieces, but they could really use one more center to really make their top three solid. I think they could, honestly, what I think they should give up is Matt Dumba. I love Dumba. He's a fantastic player. He's an incredible player for that locker room. He's an important piece, but when you're strictly looking at his play, he can be a defensive liability quite often. He jumps into the play probably a little too often. He's often leaving the front of the net to go jump into the play when the puck hasn't left the defensive zone yet. When he stays at home and plays defense, he's a fantastic defenseman. He's one of the best. Not gonna lie, he's up there in elite level in terms of skill, but he doesn't. It's not a consistent thing with him. So I think as a Wild fan with the $6 million cap hit, he would probably be the best one to move on from without sacrificing too much of the team that exists. Realistically, I see Kevin Fiala getting moved. Fiala had an issue with Bill Guerin, the GM of the Wild last season, reaching a contract, and they kind of did a one-year bridge deal type thing, and the Wild cap situation's going to be worse next season. He's a restricted free agent after this year. He's playing great. He's probably someone you want to hold on to until the offseason because of how well he's playing. But at the same time, I don't know. I think he's going to command more money than he's making. I think it's personally up for debate. He's really clicking with Matt Boldy. That's really formed into a solid, second, third line. The Wild kind of swap. You have Foligno and Greenway on the second line, but sometimes they act as the third line, and kind of depends how the night goes. Dean Evanson for you. I love it. But I don't know. I think Fiala might be the one to go in search of JT Miller, and maybe you have JT Miller play with, Kaprizov and Zuccarello. Maybe you have him play with that third line and Boldy, and I don't know who you bring up as that other winger, but it's interesting. Sorry, I spent quite a bunch of time talking about JT Miller. The next few should be fairly quick, though. A lot of rumors about Patrice Bergeron of the Bruins going to the Montreal Canadiens. His agent just signed as the GM for the Montreal Canadiens. I don't know why that's not in any of the trade rumor articles or any rumor articles about Bergeron. There's no mention of his agent signing as the GM of the Canadiens. That's kind of where these rumors spawn from. I don't know. I don't see it. Not at least next season. He's a free agent after this year. The Bruins are gonna find a way to sign him. You have to find a way to sign your franchise player. One of your franchise players. One of the, a future Hall of Famer. Someone you're gonna have their number retired from. At this point in his career, you find a way to sign him. It's that simple. Maybe we see him play until 39 or something, and he takes a league minimum contract for his last year. Go plays in Quebec. Plays for the Canadiens. Who knows? That could happen. But in terms of next season, I don't see it happening. Especially when he's playing with some guys like Brad Marchand. Craig Smith has been pretty good. Pasternak. Taylor Hall on the power play. You got a good team. You're the captain. You're a leader in that locker room. I don't see that happening. I don't know. I don't know why we're still talking about Bergeron to the Canadiens. It's kind of crazy. It's not going to happen. All right, Flyers. I feel like nobody's been talking about the Flyers being sellers, but they're totally going to be sellers at the deadline. They're very tight on cap space. They have, and not very tight, but they're pretty tight on cap space. They have a bunch of extensions coming up. They'll be very tight next year. You got Farabee getting an extension. You got, I think there's another player or two that get pay raises. So you look at people like players like Ristolainen, hasn't had the best season in Philly, kind of a lost season. He's a free agent after this year. Could be, if he has a chance to play elsewhere, he could be a very steal. It could be a steal of a trade. He was pretty good in Buffalo. I liked him a lot in Buffalo as a defensive player. So we'll see. I think that's intriguing. Claude Giroux, he has a no-trade clause, and the GM said if Claude Giroux wants to be traded, it's really up to Claude. His contract's up after this season. I don't think he gets the same contract he's on, but I also like to see him stick his career out with Philly. I think he's one of those players that does eventually get his number lifted into the rafters in Philly, and man, I'm growing up a Boston fan. I don't like the Flyers at all, but you have to have respect for Claude Giroux, and he's been an incredible player in the league. So I'm glad they're kind of letting it be on his terms and see what he wants to do. Another interesting name that could be up is Ivan Provorov. I get he's not having the best season. He's kind of but I don't know. He's still a young defenseman. I don't really see him getting moved unless the price is right, and it could be. There could be a team that pays quite a bit for Provorov, but I don't know. I personally don't see Provorov getting moved either. Again, he might. The Flyers are going to be kind of a dark horse selling team. Who knows who's going to come out of Philly? It's kind of why I'm wearing the Seattle hat. Who knows? And same for the next team, Coyotes. Just some notables on the board. Phil Kessel, he's at the end of the season. He's like, I don't care where I go as long as they have good hot dogs. So I respect that. He could be an asset to a team. He's hasn't lost a step in in Arizona. His numbers show a little bit of a dip over prior seasons, but if you just watch him, he's still playing at an elite level. I don't know how. His age, and he just gains weight, and he's still got that lethal wrist shot from the point. So Lawson Krause I thought was an interesting one. I think if a team's looking to solidify their depth up the middle, he's a fantastic third line center. Chychrun is another one that's been on kind of in the rumor mill. I don't know. Honestly, I think if one team's in the lead for Chychrun, it's Boston, and I think they give up too much, and I don't really feel like that fills the void or the need in Boston. I think they really should just go after, oh my God, Dylan Strome. Two Stromes, they always confuse me, from Chicago, to fill that second line center role. Honestly, you trade him straight up for the DeBrusk or whatever. Both players want to trade. It works out perfectly. This you'd have to give up. For Chychrun, you're a first and an existing established player and a prospect, and that could translate to a first and a second if it's a team like Tampa or Florida that's really interested. And I don't know. I think if Boston goes for it, they're going to pay too much. And I like Chychrun a lot. He's an unbelievable player, but with the amount of players the Bruins have in their defensive depth chart, I don't get that. So I'm really curious to see if he gets dealt, where he goes. I'd kind of be surprised if he gets dealt. I don't think many teams are going to want to give up that much. Most teams, it's kind of tough to give up that amount of cap space. See, making 4-point-something million a year. But the Coyotes are also willing to take on cap space to invest in the future, which is nice. Another guy I thought was really interesting was Shane Gostisbehere. He's had an unbelievable season. If you watch any Coyotes game, he's very noticeable. He's really playing both ends of the ice. He's been actually pretty good defensively for the Coyotes, which He wasn't in Philly. He wasn't. He had games where he was good. He'd make a few good plays, but in I don't know. It wasn't working for him in Philly, and he could be a surprise one. Leah Bushkin, I think, would be an interesting one. I think Leah Bushkin should end up in Boston. I think that's the type of player they need. A cheap defensive defenseman who's going to be responsible. But I think he could be an asset to almost any team out there. I'm curious to see where he goes. Honestly, I think the Canucks would be a pretty good fit. They have a lot of, or even Colorado, to really have that stay-at-home. I'm not going to get involved in offense, but I'm going to make sure I play responsible, solid defense. His contract's up this year. And another one I keep seeing in the rumor mill is Vamelka. He's their goalie. Let's see, 25. They brought him up. He's played pretty well. I don't know if I see him getting moved. Obviously, with the Coyotes, if the price is right, they will move him. But I don't know. He's young. He's a restricted free agent. They're probably not going to stick with Scott Wedgwood for the future. I think Vamelka is at least a solid option for the next few years. Kind of see how his career pans out, and if he turns into an NHL starter, fantastic. If not, well, you're not really losing much. So next up we have Toffoli or Dvorak to the Flames. I thought these were intriguing and kind of baseless. The Flames definitely have a need to boost their depth scoring. They don't have depth scoring. It doesn't show up. It's very similar to Boston. They don't have depth scoring. It's that simple. Toffoli and Dvorak would provide a good amount. Here's kind of the issue with that. The Canadiens are looking to sell players because they're in a tough cap spot. The Flames are also in a really tough cap spot. I don't really know. What do they have? I think they have like $1 million-ish in cap space. You really gotta. It's not really as beneficial for the Canadiens unless you're getting draft picks and maybe a player's contract that expires after this year that you really don't have to re-sign. But the Flames don't really have those players. I personally don't see this working from a cap standpoint and a mutual beneficiary standpoint. I don't think a trade with these two teams for Toffoli or Dvorak would be beneficial to both teams. That's how trades are supposed to work. So I don't know. I'm calling shenanigans on that. I think the Flames do make a deal. I think they do bump up their depth scoring. I don't think they get Dvorak or Toffoli. Be really cool, and I'd like to see it. I think they would both be excellent players in Calgary, but I personally don't see that specific trade happening. All right. So Tomas Hertl, dude's having, I don't know, probably a career year. Having a great year. A lot of rumors with Hertl going to the Bruins. Bruins need a guy like Hertl. He's a great player. I don't know. I think they should go for it again. Second line center. He has a positive face-off percentage. He's usually a little above 50%. Takes a substantial amount of face-offs. Kind of like JT Miller. I think it could be interesting, but the Bruins would have to shed cap space off to make it work. They'd have to get rid of DeBrusk and probably a defensive player that makes $3 million plus. You're also, this is a guy that's 45 games played. He's scored 22 goals. He's playing about a point per game pace, which is about a career year for him. You'll have to give up a first round pick because you assume the Bruins are making the playoffs. They might not, but you assume they are. It's going to be a late first round pick. So you give up a second round pick with that. You give up a first round pick for this year and next year. I think the Bruins organization should be very hesitant to give away their first round picks at this point because they don't really have prospects that are up and coming. They need to build up their prospect pool. It's pretty terrible. Do you give up your young defenseman Vakanainen? I don't know. I think this would also be a good. I think this would be a good trade for the Bruins. He can step up and be a first line center. We'll see. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. What you have any questions? Let me know. I enjoy hockey. I enjoy talking about hockey and looking at these stats and stuff. And the rumors are always interesting each year. And all right, to kind of summarize, my prediction for this trade deadline is it's just not going to be active. Too many teams are too close to the cap. I think we'll see salary dumps more than we have in prior seasons because so many teams are close to the cap. And you have teams like Seattle and Arizona that are really like, we'll take money for picks, like we'll take your bad contracts at this point. We'll see. I really, there's a lot of rumors spreading this year, and I feel like it's more than the typical trade deadline rumor year. But I personally, I don't see it being a busy trade deadline. I think it'll be very similar to what we saw last year. There might be a couple big trades, but I don't think we're going to see much. That's just my opinion. I hope I'm wrong. I love to see trades. I love to see big trades. I love to analyze them. We'll see. But thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And take care, guys.